Welcome back, everyone, to Mark Holbut's vlog. Everyone, thanks for joining in on this glorious day. And it's actually very, very nice out here, with the exception of the fact that it rained last night. And what we have here is a bit of an icy condition. As you can see, we have dry and we have rain, and that basically coated the entire roadway with water, which makes it very, very slippery and extremely treacherous. If you can notice all of the ice on the road, that's not wet, that's ice. But today I can't help but talk about one of my favorite subjects again. Here we are. We've been on a bit of a tangent in previous weeks, but we have the beautiful, glorious, featuring the F-Type R, what we have parked right here. And I just can't help but talk about a few things. Been talking about some folks, on the other channel. People have made comments about me, as obviously I talk on Exotic Car Play Place a little bit about reliability, quite a bit actually. And there's a lot of brands that take a hit because they have obviously reliability issues. I mean, BMW, for example, certainly has its share of problems. And I've been, more than graciously enough to offer up what I've experienced. I mean, I've had my share of issues. And therefore, I've had people challenge me on that. And I'm not here to pretend that Jaguar is perfect by any means or any stretch of the imagination. But clearly, with comments that I'm getting on both Exotic Car Play Place as well as on this channel, I've had people ask me the question. Even I get a lot of emails, people reaching out to me behind the scenes that aren't even in comments, and they're asking, hey, you seem to really promote the Jaguar or the F-Type. What is it really like? Is it really that unreliable? Is it a bad car? Is it a good car from a reliability standpoint? And so I want to talk about that. Today I want to talk about a few of the things that I can share with you. I mean, there's a million things that can go wrong with a modern day car. I mean, look at a Mercedes-Benz. Clearly lots of technology buried in there. And the same thing goes with a Jaguar like this. Lots of technology. So the potential is very, very high that something fails. However, there are some common problems that are notoriously known. And this isn't going to be an Exotic Car Play Place video. This is going to be me talking very candidly with you guys out there from my personal perspective on reliability. But what is reliability? I mean, I'll touch on a few of the issues that we see that are common with these cars, but there is a definite differentiation to be made. Reliability versus problems can be two entirely different things. Every reliability issue is a problem, but not every problem is a reliability issue. In other words, you can have problems. For example, people talk a lot of times about the convertible roofs that don't work. Well, that's not really reliability. They can talk about the windows that scratch because you have problems with crap getting gummed up in the seal and it scratches the window when you go up and down. People talk about this sometimes popping out or not functioning at all. There's a lot of those problems that people talk about, and they're all over the forums, and a lot of them are actually correct. A lot of them do happen, and I'll share a few of those with you, but those aren't reliability, because reliability is about if the car gets you to home or not. That's the key. The problems that are significant enough either puts you into limp mode or shuts down the car completely or assures that you have to take the car home on the flatbed truck, basically. So that's reliability. Reliability means it lets you down in some way. Now, problems, yes, these cars have some problems. Of course, we know about that, and I'll mention some along the way. But reliability-wise, I want to start up by saying, coincidentally lately, I was out in a public outing, and I ran across a gentleman who is part of this group, but he doesn't really know what I do. He doesn't know that I'm into these videos. He doesn't know about all this stuff that I do. I got a phone call from the Jaguar dealer locally, and they reached out to say, hey, are you ready for your winter tires? Do you have a set of tires or rims? And if not, can we help you out with that? So that was a dealer doing basically a cold call to me. And when I got off the phone, I said, no, I'll call the service department later and I'll give them a shout. I was kind of busy at the moment. So I ended up hanging up the phone. This gentleman that was part of the social group happened to overhear my conversation, and he said, oh, you got car problems? I said, no. I said, that was the Jaguar dealer reaching out for some tires. He said, oh, that's kind of funny. He goes, I work for Jaguar. So it turns out this gentleman openly admitted that he was a service tech for the last almost 20 years for Jaguar and Land Rover. Wow. That really just opened up the conversation. So I really had to dig in, and I grilled this tech literally for the good part of an hour, just, you know, the goods, the bads. Is this true? Is that true? Have you seen some of these? And really, how reliable are the F-Types? So I want to start out by saying this is coming from a factory tech, somebody who works on these cars every single day. And openly he admitted that a lot of the Range Rover products, because of the complexities that they have, and some of the vehicles, that's just the way they're built, they aren't all the most reliable. There are some really gross failures in some of those vehicles, he openly admitted. He did suggest that there's some Jaguars that are better than others in terms of the models. He did say the F-Type was almost exclusively one of the most reliable models he comes across. Now, part of it, he admitted, most of the F-Types he sees are fairly low mileage. I mean, most of the cars he admitted saw, you know, he sees 20, 20, 15, 20, 30, maybe 40,000 kilometers on it. Well, my car is sitting at 58,000 kilometers right now. So it's one of the higher mileage F-Types around, at least around these parts. But admittedly, he does not remember seeing a whole lot of real chronic mechanical type failures. There's a few things he had mentioned. I want to talk about a few of those things along the way, the mechanical type issues or electrical issues that will leave these stalled out on the roadside and essentially affect you on a reliability perspective. We'll touch on that. But overall, his interpretation or assessment of the Jaguar F-Type reliability was actually one that deserved a green light. And it's really unfounded, a lot of the reliability concerns. A lot of people believe they're horribly unreliable. I would truly dispute that. As a matter of fact, I'll go a step further. On social media, there's a group, they call themselves Hot Cars, and I came across them doing a Google search, and they talk about the most reliable sports cars, and believe it or not, the F-Type was up there. It was on the list with cars like the Miata, the S2000 Honda. It was also up there with the Porsche 911, the liquid-cooled 911s, which coincidentally are a little more reliable than some of the older air-cooled 911s. But there was a lot of great sports cars, the Subaru BRZ, cars that we know and have significant track records of being reliable, and the F-Type was up there. Also, the Audi TT, actually fairly reliable overall. I mean, they have some of their electric issues that you can find in some of the Audi products, but overall, not an terribly unreliable car. Coincidentally, the only BMW on that list was the Z4, and I suspect that's with certain model engine configurations. That's not all Z4s. You get one with the N54, you're into a world of hurt. But anyway, let's talk about the F-Type, the reliability issues, the things that will literally leave you stranded, not so much all the nickel and dime stuff that will still cost money. Don't get me wrong. I've done those videos. I've talked about some of the common issues that you can find with these cars. But some of the common issues are just that, like cracked windshields. They're fragile glass, they crack. Okay, that's not a reliability issue. Let's get into some of the reliability issues, and let's take this one from the top. Number one issue that we typically can find in a lot of these F-Types, and you hear about it all over the internet. And of course, one of the things I actually asked that service tech about, and he had a little bit to talk about that as well. Now, obviously the car's sitting in the garage. Here you can see it's cold outside, so I keep it in here most days. So let's just do this. Let's pop the infamous trunk. Let's crack that. And then the first problem is what we'll find down in here. Now ignore some of this mess. This is just me being me. So let's just flip this up. Okay, we got this little panel here. Let's lift that up and move that to the back. Now what do we have here? We have a little kit. Oh great, that's an air pump and so on. But what do we have buried under here? There's a little tab down here. We pull on that and we can just kind of partially release this. And we can pull this up, slide that up forward. What do we have here? This is the reason number one for reliability concerns. And we're looking at the Jaguar battery right there, parked down in this spot. So let's close that up. All right, there we go. So it's that battery that's a source of a lot of problems. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, these cars have a lot of electronics and they sit and they drain the battery down. So if you park your car in the garage like this for a long time and then you think you're going to go out for that glorious Sunday morning drive, you go to start the car and it's dead. Well, that's something that'll really take the wind out of your sails in a hurry now, isn't it? So that battery is known to deteriorate very, very quickly. It's heavy, it's expensive, and that's just a really bad scene. So a lot of people get disturbed and PO'd by that. So that's a common issue. Now, sometimes it's just from sitting so long that these batteries die. There's another situation where some people use those cheap OBD code readers. Say, for example, you spit out a code on your dash and you want to go check it out, and you plug in one of those dongles under the dash besides the steering wheel. And then you pull your code and you think life's good and you unplug and you go on your merry way. Well, it's all over the forums that a lot of people doing that, if they don't formally disconnect or do the handshake bye-bye, that essentially that OBD2 code reader can cause that computer to go into sort of an endless cycle of silliness, for lack of a better word, and it can just sit there and chew away until it kills the battery prematurely. So using a bad OBD2 code reader can actually kill a battery, and again, just extended sitting time like this can kill the battery too. So let's close this up. Boom, right there. Reason number one that these cars, or issue number one that these cars may have for reliability. Issue number two has to do, everybody knows that the differential of these cars is electronic. They also are very, very prone to overheating. If you're driving this car hard, if you decide you want to take this car out to the track and you drive it really, really hard, I know the experts in the field will say, hey, the people that actually try these and drive them hard, maybe those that actually test them and, you know, the folks that get involved in aftermarket updates and upgrades for these cars will argue with this. But for the sake of the matter is driving it really hard for an extended period of time will prematurely overheat that differential, potentially causing it to fail. The other problem is there is a actual a vent on that differential that needs to be cleaned out properly. Sometimes it plugs off, and sometimes these things just essentially leak, bubble over. Proper maintenance on your differential, and drive it spirited, but in surges and whatnot, and basically take care of that, because a poorly maintained rear differential will certainly cause you a roadside failure. So if you don't look after that, again, changing the fluid frequently, blowing out that vent and cleaning everything up, and drive it in the way it should be driven in a spirited fashion but not abused, you'll find yourself in a very good spot. But that is a common issue that some of these vehicles and owners of these vehicles are experiencing. All right, let's go into the car. So I'm just going to hit the old go button on that, and away she goes. We're going to open that up. And so there's very little to go wrong in here. Sure, you can get electronic problems. You got switches and buttons and relays. You can also have potential issues with that vent. I hear people talking about that vent goes maybe half open and shuts or seizes up. That is always going to be a potential problem. That vent moves up and down. That's going to be a challenge for a lot of people. You know that's going to be a failure point. It's on plastic gears and it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. Depending on your settings of the heater controls will dictate what that thing does. Well, the more you use that, the more likeliness you're going to see a failure. Now, the positive part is that's not going to be a showstopper. That's not a reliability issue. That's just an absolute pain in the ass issue, but it's not a reliability issue. People talk about squeaks and rattles from the seats against this rear wall right here. You can certainly get some of that noise. Again, more of an annoyance, not a reliability issue. This transmission, that's an 8-speed ZF 8-speed automatic transmission. Similar gearbox that you'll find in a lot of modern day BMWs, and many other cars use that. But it's not just because it's convenient. You can paddle your gears like this. You can put it in sport mode so it shifts very quickly, or you can put it in dumbed down auto mode. And while there are the odd, rare potential issue for the transmission failing, in other words, it can't find a gear, it won't hold a gear, maybe it slips a gear, possibly just doesn't engage or doesn't disengage. Any one of those kind of problems, even noise, can be a problem. But the reality is that ZF 8-speed automatic is just that bulletproof. So people ask if the automatic transmissions in these cars are problematic. My general consensus is no. Now, it's not to say that every vehicle won't experience a transmission issue. A, maintenance. B, the harder you drive it is obviously going to have an impact on its overall reliability, but it's quite a stout unit. So I'm generally not too worried about the automatic transmission, and there's really nothing else on the inside of this car other than basic electronics, which can let you down. As you can see right there too, that infotainment system is a bit of a pain. There's a SIM card that goes in there that actually feeds some of the brains of this operation, particularly the navigation. Well, that's an issue. And mine personally had that issue happen as well, ongoing. So it's electric, sometimes can let you down. So what about under the hood? What kind of problems do you find under there that maybe let you down? Let's pop the hood. Okay, there we are, the big, beautiful 5-liter V8 in all of its glory. Some people do say take this shroud off, this plastic housing. I mean, it adds for the overall cosmetics of the engine, but it certainly doesn't help for reliability. Not that it's a real issue, although some people say, hey, that just traps some of the heat into the engine. Why not take it off? Well, I left mine on there. Some people like to take that off. I don't personally think it's going to have a huge impact one way or the other. I just leave mine on. Cooling systems are also another showstopper. Everybody knows if you dump a bunch of coolant on the ground, it's not that you're dumping it on the ground, killing all the rabbits and the cats in the neighborhood, but the problem with that is your car no longer has the capacity to properly cool itself. It'll overheat. And when you're talking about an all aluminum engine, you're probably going to cook that thing to death. Essentially, not just cause yourself a roadside disturbance, but you're likely probably going to destroy something. So cooling leaks and coolant problems are a bit of a potential issue here. And I want to show you some of the issues that people have found with some of these F-types. I think it's important to identify those. Let's take this kind of from a couple typical spots. Obviously, there's a water pump that can fail with these vehicles, but that's pretty typical failure point. A lot of vehicles can see a water pump that fails. And if it does, you're not pushing the coolant to all the right orifices through the radiator and through all the thermostat and all the other elements. So then you're not going to cool your engine properly. So if you're getting high temperature, but you're not necessarily blowing white smoke out the back, and you're also not necessarily leaking it on the ground, maybe the coolant, and you're overheating, maybe there's an issue with your water pump. Also, they can leak, by the way. You also have that your overflow tank, your expansion tank. I've heard of people seeing that bubble over. Sometimes that's a result of a bad water pump too. So sometimes you do see these relieving or having a problem or just leaking because they are plastic, and there's a little vent. There's a little vent relief right there, that little dot. And then so they can leak, they can crack, they can break, they can just not necessarily wear out, but they can also be a source of your leaks. There's all Y pipe on the front here too for the cooling system. That's a very common issue. And I know the F-Pace that we had briefly there, apparently there's a pipe that goes to a cooler somewhere on the front right-hand side that is a known issue for leaks. And if it leaks, sometimes it's very small and slow and subtle, but it can slowly dissipate and you wind up having to top up your coolant every once in a while. So if you get a low coolant, definitely investigate. You might have a leak, and hopefully you're not burning it, because I'll tell you right now, burning coolant is much worse than leaking coolant, because if it's leaking, most likely it's a component, a hose, a fitting, easy to change. If it's burning it, it usually means you have an internal engine problem and quite possibly a head gasket. But I don't think that's typically a problem so much for the F-types. I'm not really hearing that as so much the issue. It's really more that Y pipe and the expansion tank, water pump, a few of the fittings. Of course, they will eventually with time, because there's a lot of plastic under the hood there, not too unlike BMWs. So it's one of those things just to be aware of. It's not uncommon to lose coolant. If you get a low coolant light, definitely want to investigate it. Don't leave it like that for very long. But that's one common area that can certainly leave you bummed out roadside. Another problem, of course, is this engine, you've got a V8, it's direct injected. In other words, it uses these high pressure fuel injectors that spray fuel inside the combustion chamber. Yes, in other words, better metering, better performance overall, but it causes problems. You can get carbon fouling in the intake, on the backs of the intake valves, and as well, they don't get rinsed off properly. So those fuel injectors, they do a great wonder when they're working new, but those fuel injectors are a common problem. You lose a fuel injector, misfire, you're going limp mode, or it's going to shut you down if you have too much of a problem. And the fuel injectors and the fuel pump are relatively common issues with this vehicle. Now, not so common that you have to worry about it with every vehicle, but it's going to be a potential issue. Now, of course, it's not just those issues. We have other problems with these vehicles too. So what are some of the problems you can expect as well? Isn't just the injectors and the fuel pumps, and it's not just the odd coolant leak that some cars have. You also have O2 sensors. As you look down in there, very difficult to get access to, but on the exhaust side of that engine, you're going to have O2 sensors that monitor the mixture coming out of the exhaust system, both up and downstream of the catalytic converter. And those O2 sensors are not uncommon to fail. And when they do, it'll spit out a check engine light on the dash. And if you see that CEL and it's related to an O2 sensor, well, surprise, surprise, that is a common issue. And that will potentially cause you a running condition. Now, will that shut you down? Probably won't keep the car from running, but it's not an ideal or optimal situation. So those are other common problems. Another one is you can get a rattle in here. Of course, you can get a rattly noise. And if you're hearing a noise on the front end of this engine, remember, what we have here, this is the supercharger sitting flat on top of that V8. And there's a snorkel on the front that snorkels down, has a pulley on the front of it that is very difficult to see from here because it's very tight. But there's a pulley down in there. And on the end of that snorkel, it's not uncommon for the bearings and for that to wear out and start wobbling and making some noise. So if you're getting a real metallic or noisy top end sound out of this engine, there's a good possibility we're talking about a supercharger issue. And usually it's on the snorkel end of that supercharger. It's, you know, it's not so much in the pan itself as it is usually on the front end of the snorkel or the pulley. So that's not an uncommon, you know, item that potentially could either cause you a lot of problems, very expensive repairs, or even more so, worst case scenario, if a supercharger fails outright, well, that might be a bigger issue. So there's a lot of mechanical issues that could happen here. They're not overly common, but they're common enough and they're worth talking about. So generally, as a rule, I would say they're no more or less reliable than what you're finding with a lot of modern day sports cars. They're not horrible. Are they perfect? No, nothing's really perfect these days. I got stories too about Toyota and Honda, trust me, and I'll share those in the future. But let me tell you right now, not horribly unreliable. Yes, there's a few problems, squeaks, rattles, infotainment issues, SIM card problems, scratching glass. You got a few nickel and dime issues like that. The odd door handle or key fob problem. I mean, whatever. Yes, those are there and they happen and they're somewhat problematic, but they're not reliability based. And the fact that this is built on an aluminum chassis, it's a very unique vehicle, sexy as hell. As a matter of fact, when I had that Tesla here for about a month and a half during the summer because we were waiting for this car to get fixed after some clown smashed it here in the front of the street. While I was driving that Tesla, I literally felt like I might have been losing some of my identity. I might have been one of those mannequins. You walk into the store at Sears and you see a mannequin there that they forgot to put the underwear on and he's standing there just missing something. I don't know, whatever that is. That's what I felt like driving the Tesla. But every time I start up the ignition on this car, I feel like my shoulders get a little broader and I start growing more hair on my chest. I don't know what it is. Just a feeling I get every time I get behind the wheel of an F-Type R like this. It's just an awesome car. And that's, you know, again, I've spoken about this before. You know, when I drove this car the very first time, I took it for a test drive a week after I drove a brand new 911. So I was debating 911 Carrera 4S with the latest generation, second generation 991 that had the twin turbo 3-liter with the PDK. And the car was awesome. I mean, you can't fault it. It's a 911. Modern 911 was great. And then I drove this a week later and I just knew I wanted the F-Type. It was just the 911, I felt like I was just intensity, like I felt like a race car driver. But then I got into the Jag and I was just like, I couldn't get the grin on my face, off my face, and I just felt like I was just having the time of my life. So reliability, moderate, no worse than really anything else out there, for being honest. Like if you're considering buying a BMW, an Audi, or a Benz, I would consider one of these. This is no better, no worse than some of those other cars. Believe it. Believe you and me. Now, I've had this car for a few years. This car is not as bad as a lot of people say. Jaguar is the worst thing. They're not the worst. These cars are actually really, really good. Quite reliable. Yeah, a few nickel and dime things. Like I said, electrics are a potential problem area. But overall, I love this thing. Still no plans to unload it, sell it, or do anything. It's just great. So reliability-wise, the F-Type R, just amazing. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video. Just a quick summary. I've been having a lot of questions and comments, like I said, via email. So I just hope that answers it for you. And if you have any more, please drop me a line. I'd love to hear it because I certainly, I connect. I'm part of the F-Type, some of the forums on Facebook. And it's great to see some of the banter and the comments there. It's sad to see when the odd car gets smashed and gets towed away. But it's fun to see people, hey, I just bought my new car. I just bought my new F-Type. Look at it. It's great to see that. And congrats to those who are just in the process of purchasing their next F-Type or possibly have just bought one. Congrats. I'm sure you'll enjoy every minute of it. So hopefully we can help you with that on this channel. So be sure to subscribe. Remember, life's too damn short to drive boring cars like this. Sure, reliable. Oh, but boring. Why bother? Right there. Get yourself the car of your dreams. And maybe this isn't it. I don't know. it's up for you to decide. I'm just telling you from my perspective, amazing cars. And I hope to see each and every one in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.